Many people are now waking up to the simulation that we're living in right now. Why is it that the simulation is becoming more and more apparent? Because what's happening is that we are always, as a human collective, we are always looking for outside sources. I say it all the time because I'm repeating myself because the message is very important, but we are always influenced by religion, politics, social norms, our family, which is the original bondage of our ability, our freedom to be able to self-realize. And in order to self-realize, we must individually disconnect so that we can reset individually. And because enough of us haven't been doing that collectively, enough of us, then what we're, as a human collective, we are experiencing the actual earth reset. And now this is one of many. This is like a very normal phenomenon that happens. It's not by accident, it's not by coincidence, it's part of the experimentation / experience that many of y'all signed up for before you incarnated here. And this is for people who are not aware, I'm saying this, of course, is that you made this agreement before this. You made just about everything. No, you cannot control the outcome, but you kind of like were part of the whole process of this template in your experiences as a human. And many of you who are coming into an awareness that you're very ancient, you're an old soul, it's starting to come to you in pieces for some, and others it comes to you in at a faster rate. And the reason why it doesn't just come just really quickly is because there is such thing as spiritual psychosis in this realm in reality for many reasons. But one is because we are in density form matter, and our human avatar, although millions of years evolved, it still requires a sense of evolution. Just like it took 9 months, as an example, for you to actually be conceived from embryo to an infant. It took 9 months, right? In spirit realm, that 9 months means like time is actually not of the essence. So what happens is that if you look at things from the scope of time, then yeah, everything seems to go slower. If you're out of shape, what happens? You have to like slowly get into shape. But once you change the neuroplasticity and you change your embodiment from the focus and the attention and the discipline and the image that you want to see in your future self as far as how you want to be in shape. So what happens is that then eventually, if you honor the time and the discipline, eventually your body will mold into becoming more disciplined, more in shape, more muscular if you're into like muscles and trying to get in shape that way, right? And for some people, right, depending on their genetic predisposition, it happens sooner, and for others it can take a while. But if you have that self-discipline, you can create almost anything that you want to a sense where, depending on the variations of your limitations of self and of genetic codes and imprints within your DNA, that's kind of like the agreement that you make to be able to integrate your heart's desires into your reality, so that your reality that you're living in as a human being matches your heart. And the reason why it's very difficult for many people is there are many different reasons, because again, incarnating here is that Earth, by all means, is a school, is the most complex, challenging school within the perceivable universe, within our level of consciousness of understanding. So when I say universe, it's the universe within what we can perceive. It's a lot more in depth than that, but it's even more in depth than I can even comprehend within my avatar, because it would not make sense within the verbiage that we are accustomed to speaking, right? You would have to go into higher dimensions of conscious states to be able to perceive, and that's within your own self, within your meditation, within your inner sight of seeing. If you went 100% into whatever that means before you incarnated here, your human vessel would not be able to correspond and relate, because again, the time that it took for this vessel to have matriculated into, let's say Marcus, me, myself, into this particular avatar, I call it avatar because that's how we understand it, but this vessel, we're honoring the DNA codes of our ancestors between both the maternal side and the paternal side. So that takes an evolution, right? We're talking hundreds, thousands, 10,000s of years for some ancient souls. So what's happening is that this is how we are ascending into the newer age of how our avatar should ascend along with the ascension cycle of Mother Earth. We all play an important integral role into her ascension. Unfortunately, because of spiritual psychosis, many of you have been born into this reality completely disregarding your mission as to why you incarnated here, which is part of your lesson. And it's not that it's unfortunate, but it may take reincarnations or time for you to evolve, because like I said in past videos, it may not have been your intention to evolve that way. You're evolving in different ways, and one way is never a better way than the other, because if you think about the family tree of life, and I don't mean just your ancestral line, but I mean every single soul that is in human flesh, right, in the physical 3D sense of a way, we all take a role into being kind of like mitochondria to the, if you think of Mother Earth as a big nucleus of cell structure of the entire universe, or at least the perceivable universe, then we would be considered as mitochondria. You know, we would be considered as an important integration or integral role of the ascension of the cell, which is dividing. No different than an embryo. No different than, even though we can't see each other, but in biology and human biology, our cells are constantly doing so. And it's happening at such a fast rate that when you measure it, it seems like it's a slow rate because our eyes can't perceive that. And so again, we have these 5 sensory systems, which everything that is too fast, our brain cannot capture it, because again, we're relying on the 5 sensory systems, because the spectrum has been altered to a certain frequency so that our human avatar experiences what it's like to be within this human avatar. So think of an ant. I don't know why ants came to me right now, but think of an ant. An ant has an expression of the way an ant perceives life, right? And imagine giving the ants human eyes, right, within the script of it. It would not fit within the principles and the laws of how this world is constructed as far as the laws of energy, naturally speaking. So for an ant to evolve, the ant has to leave its avatar. The soul is still a fragmented piece of the ant populace, right? So as the ant evolves, integrating with humans, although it can't see us, there's something within its evolution that had to experience probably being crushed to death by us, and to have experienced death over and over and over. Maybe that single ant didn't experience death, but the collective of all ants keeps getting evolved until eventually, hundreds of thousands of years later, I don't know, eventually something has to change in the supernatural sense of the universe into the experiences of the ants. And that's why we have many animal species kingdoms here, because I'm not saying that all species are going to evolve, but this is a place where evolution within the avatar of that creation is more than possible, and it's more than applicable. It's been happening, and in order for us to be able to honor that, us too as a human collective, we need to be able to be born here and to remember nothing at all, for the most part. And there are a few of us that are remembering, because we, again, like a high priest and high priestess per se, again, the true ones don't care for the title at all. I'm going to tell you right now, the true ones, they're going to look like, I don't know, they're going to look like regular, you know, regular clothes, regular people. And it's usually the people that kind of like put them up on a pedestal. And I think of like Krishnamurti, where he had like the genetic DNA. I think they already knew from his astrology and whatnot in India that they knew that he was a guru, and he denounced that. He didn't care for that, you know. He had his issues. He was human just like everyone else, you know. But if you think about him, he denounced that. He didn't want to be called guru. He thought it was nonsense, baloney, because that wasn't a high frequency of understanding what it means to be human. To be human is to actually be void of all of these titles and to live as you are. And we think that's primal, and we think that's primitive if we go into, like, let's say the jungle, or if we go into where we think where people are not as evolved. Again, going into, like, let's say South America and whatnot, or certain like certain tribes or indigenous cultures where they're not as strongly influenced as of yet with the Western culture. You would notice that they are much more advanced than us. They are much more advanced because they do not require the use of cell phones. They don't require to communicate like this. If you and I know whoever travels and travels into visiting such families, or maybe your family, you know, maybe your bloodline, right? You understand what I'm talking about. If it's within your bloodline and you're from, like, I don't know, you're from the forest of Brazil, or you're from anywhere in South America as an example. I'm just using that as an example. You already understand what I mean. You visit one family, it's not necessarily just a bloodline, but the whole family within that village or that pueblo or that area, they're breathing alongside with Mother Earth the same. So when you're speaking to one, in essence, you're speaking to all of them. It's like one tribe. And that's a beautiful experience for those who are not in that experience, because we lost that experience. And because of separation, because, again, I say this all the time, because of politics, religion, social norms, even being a vegan, if you call yourself I don't eat meat, right, as of the last couple of years, but I don't call myself a vegan. I just don't call myself anything. I'm a conscious eater. But every time you separate yourself, it's part of your human experience. But there comes a time where you have to graduate from that. Because every time you separate yourself to say that my kind or my way is bigger or better or badder or purer, then you're segregating yourself, and you're actually feeding into a system that wants you to be separated. Once you honor everybody's similarities and differences, then you realize that that's actually your experience. It was meant for you to experience and to graduate from. To not try to change the world, but to try to change the world within you, within your experience. So if there's something that you don't like outside of you, whether it's in the field of finance or whatever the case may be, then instead of trying to change the other person outside of you, whether it's through relationships, right, whether it's through whatever your career path is, you change yourself. And then seeing everyone, I don't want to say as pawns, but because everybody's so connected into the outside realm, it's almost like a big game of chess or Monopoly. I like to say Monopoly, I guess. And once you start to see that you are now the observer of this simulated game, then what you do as a master of self, you start to observe and to start to see what it's like to, every time you change something about yourself, how do you now attract the situation outside of you reflecting back at you? That's more important. But every time you plug in because you need to make money or you need to keep a happy or safe family, that's pretty old and primitive at this point, because you've been doing it for I don't know how long within your family bloodline, and eventually that has to evolve. You're in the healing realm, you're in your healing journey. How often do you have to, how much longer do you need to heal? More lifetimes? Or when you die, is that called healing? Think about that. I'm just saying that eventually you have to be able to graduate, as the intention of this video. One must, when it's your time, be able to graduate beyond all of the constructs of outside realm so that you can start developing your natural innate construct. And in order to do that, you have to be able to plug in to yourself. Minimalistically, you have to be able to ground and earth barefoot on a daily, receive real sun, connected to the forest or the caves or the desert, whatever it is within your signature contract, but if your signature agreement as a human being, because everyone's different. And most people are not even aware of doing that. Why? Because they are not connected. They spend their entire life with school or trying to become stable. And I did that too. You understand what I mean? And because I did it so strongly, just as strongly, it needed to collapse. And if I didn't do it consciously, the universe was going to do it for me, because my subconscious was speaking to me. And once it became conscious to me, that's when I started to, started to honor it. Because the more I fought it, the more I became sicker, physically sick. I started to become ill. I have a strong mind, so it wasn't like mental illness, but in a sense it was, right? Because my mind was perceivably clear, and yet I couldn't control the outside factors. And I realized it wasn't about controlling my outside factors. It was about releasing control. It was about releasing control of self and whatever I could not control outside. Even if it meant physical death, financial death, the death of relationships, even if it meant the death of, again, physical, of self. And once you graduate beyond the fear of death, then if you don't physically die, because you could, rites of passage, you know, right? Only the strongest, right? But it's, again, the passageway of self. Once you start realizing that you were meant to, because there are no coincidences or accidents in this reality. Excuse me, the music is playing. I don't know what's happening. Once you start... Give me a second. Once you understand that this whole simulation is here to train you, to train your presence, your observation, and to collapse it so many times until something within you awakens. And I can't explain that part to you, because it's like they say you can only show the door, but the door is only but one, and everyone has that same door. It's going to look different for everyone, but once you cross over, you're going to realize that me and you are one. So the moral of this message is that there is no moral. It's supposed to be motivational. I motivate you. Is that if you resonate with me, this message is reaching you for a reason, and it's important for us to lift each other up, so that if for any reason I relate with you, and maybe perhaps you're probably someone who's already been there, done that, and you know that, then it's nice to hear from someone else. And that's the whole point, is to remind each other, and this is a positive way of using social media, to be able to say, hey, how are you? Because we are separate right now temporarily, because we're working within that grid work, within our frequency field. Let's say us, let's say if we're in the same, they say soul tribe or soul family, right? And this is a way of saying hi, you know what I mean? So that's a beautiful thing. So going back from the beginning, once you become aware of the simulation, Become aware of everyone's role that they play in your life, especially family and friends, and especially if you're seeing somebody every day within your work environment, as an example. And if you're in the woods, then pay attention to your surroundings. Like right now, I'm paying attention to the surroundings of the music. It's telling me to take it easy. You know what I mean? So as I speak, don't forget my lower chakra sense of self, my bass and my rhythm and my flow is to be able to, because the way I speak is also within my rhythm and my flow, because it's my signature contract, right? Some people are refined in such a way where they don't need to work within that frequency. They have a different way, and that's what makes us beautiful within this rainbow or spectrum of an experience. Because if we all speak individually, we all individually will relate to those other individuals that will relate to certain tribes per se. And if you do that, you no longer need to think of separation, because we're already separated. So why make it even more? Choosing religions or choosing politics, choose yourself. You know, every day choose yourself, until you realize once you choose yourself enough, maybe 2 months straight as a diet, then that's your diet right there. There is no self anymore, because you're living it. And once you do that, the simulation will get stronger on you, because it wants to keep you attached to it. And that's when it starts to get real. That's when you realize that your subconscious has been toggled to this entire demographics of an experience. And the more you start speaking in the way I'm speaking like this, because I haven't spoken like this like 20 years ago, the more it becomes more challenging. The more that the simulation starts to try to stagnate. Stagnate your intention and your message. Why? Is because once you free yourself from the simulation, you become king or queen. You become a high priestess, a high priest. You don't need the title, but you start to see things without the title. Everybody else is going to title you. They're going to call you crazy, weirdo. They're going to say you're the one who's spiritually sick and all that and yada, yada, yada. But the thing is, as you exist down here, you also exist in a higher reality of yourself. And that's when you start seeing 3 to 4D, maybe observing from the 5. And then when you take that octave or that sense of experience, then now you can see how you can keep expanding until you realize that what's the real separation between you and source, and what is there to praise and to honor, and who is there out there for you to pray to out there, right? Because once you're there, every day there, you are going to collapse all the reasons why you needed to pray in the first place. You've always been searching for yourself. And once you find yourself, you're going to realize there is no self. There was an actual simulated program for you to be having this experience of self. So it's not to discard it, but it's to detach from it naturally without having to, so that you can reintegrate yourself within a system of other fragmented souls of you, of me. You could say that's not you, but even the contrast, the shadow side of what's not you, then take that too. You understand what I mean? Because down here, there's shadows. And down here, certain frequencies exist. And everything's here for your highest good. And once you see that, there is no separation with breath and with what you like and what you don't like. And that's when you start recreating your new reality. And the simulation, while it's collapsing, it has no choice but to honor you. Because hint, hint, who's the creator of the simulation? You may say God is, or the Anunnaki was, or you can say higher extraterrestrials. You can give it so many titles. But understand, once you integrate it into the system, you are co-creating. There's no such thing as being victim. There's no such thing as being a sinner being in the simulation. Once you agree to this simulation within the quantum field that exists, with or without this simulation, then you're going to start remembering. You're going to start receiving the trickled fragments, because you're going to to the reason why you're here. And the reason actually is not a reason. The reason is actually a sense of self-integration, of actually becoming whole again, of self-remembering. And that's when it begins. That's actually the white belt. I care more for the white belt than I do for the black belt, because the black belt is kind of silly, you know. But once you're white belt, because it's like saying you graduated and you mastered some system, and now you're here in a new system. So I would say, please start holding yourself to the highest regard possible with self-love. Nobody has to understand. They will not understand, because if they're not doing the work, then they will reflect all of who they are onto you until you realize it's happening for you. And once you do that, you show compassion. Well, 1, by not taking shit from them, but by 2, your silence holds more power and authority and in presence when you realize it's not even you, it's them. You just see it all. And once you become a master of that, it no longer hurts you, because the whole point of it hurting you is because you're almost like feeling sorry for them. But when you do that, you're feeding them. You're feeding their system. And when you're feeding their system, you're actually strengthening their system. So once you actually disconnect and disengage their system, you're going to go through a sense of death, of physical, emotional, spiritual death. You will if you do that, if you dare yourself to do that. But that's the most beautiful thing you could do for that soul. If this message is finding you, I'm speaking to you. This definitely won't make sense for most people. I'd be surprised if most people would be following this message up until this point anyway. So yeah, one love, man. Direct message me if you want to schedule a consultation. Beginning to start to offer a sliding scale for those who are going through financial, difficulties, and reach out to me. And nothing's written in stone, so I will work with anyone. I won't say no to virtually anyone, especially if we're aligned to work with. And it's fair for both of us. You understand what I mean? So if there's a sense of financial crisis, whatnot, my fees are not set in stone. And it will happen, everything will happen naturally. If it's meant for us to connect, we will connect. Check out my website and you can see what services I offer. And even my services are not written in stone. Everything evolves, right? It's just a way of us connecting. It's just a bridge, okay? One love. I love you. You.